Your city feels normal until it suddenly isn't. A man is executed for something he didn't do. A father can legally kill his own child. A soldier is beaten to death over a single animal. And somewhere, a newborn's fate is decided in seconds. This isn't chaos. This is the law. Let's go back and see how it got this crazy.
Number 1. Babylon. If your house kills someone, your son dies. It's 1750 BC in ancient Babylon, and King Hammurabi has a problem. His empire is massive, stretching across most of Mesopotamia, and he needs a way to keep everyone in line. Different cities have different customs, different rules, different ideas about what's fair. So Hammurabi does something that no ruler before him had ever done on this scale. He writes it all down. He creates a code of 282 laws, covering everything from business disputes to marriage contracts to medical malpractice. And he doesn't write them on paper or a scroll that could be lost. He carves them into an 8-foot-tall pillar of black stone called a stele and plants it in the center of the city for everyone to see. This thing still exists, by the way. You can go look at it in the Louvre in Paris right now. It's been sitting there for nearly 4,000 years. Now, the Code of Hammurabi is famous for establishing the concept of an eye for an eye. If you break someone's bone, your bone gets broken. If you blind someone, you get blinded. Straightforward enough. But Hammurabi took this concept and cranked it up to a level that makes absolutely no sense to a modern person. Take Law 229. If a builder constructs a house and that house collapses and kills the owner, the builder is put to death. Okay, that's harsh, but there's a certain logic to it. Bad construction, someone dies, you pay with your life. But here's where it gets insane. Law 230 says that if the house collapses and kills the owner's son, it's not the builder who gets executed. It's the builder's son, his completely innocent child who had nothing to do with any of it. The logic, if you can call it that, was that justice meant the punishment had to mirror the crime exactly. You lost a son? The person responsible loses a son. Didn't matter that the builder's kid had literally never touched a brick in his life. The punishment was designed to match the grief, not the guilt. And it didn't stop there. If the collapse killed the owner's slave, the builder had to pay the replacement value of the slave. Because apparently, in ancient Babylon, killing someone's slave was a property crime, not a murder. If a doctor performed surgery and the patient died, the doctor's hands were cut off. Good luck performing any more surgeries after that. If you accused someone of a crime and couldn't prove it, you were executed instead. Imagine how quickly Twitter would empty out if that law existed today. The entire code reads like it was written by someone who fundamentally understood the concept of fairness, but then took it to the most extreme and literal conclusion possible. It's justice with absolutely no room for context, nuance, or mercy. And people lived under these laws for centuries. Number 2. Ancient Rome. You could legally kill your entire family. In ancient Rome, there was a legal concept called patria potestas, which translates to power of the father. And it meant exactly what it sounds like. The oldest male in a Roman family had absolute, unrestricted legal authority over every single member of his household. His wife, his children, his grandchildren, his slaves. All of them were legally his property. And when I say absolute authority, I mean he could do literally anything. He could sell his children into slavery. He could arrange their marriages and cancel them at will. He could confiscate any money or property they earned or inherited. And yes, he could execute them. His own children, his own grandchildren, legally. No trial, no justification needed. If the father decided his adult son had been disobedient or had brought shame to the family, he could have him killed, and the state would not intervene. Now, to be fair, by the later Republic and Empire periods, actually killing your kids was considered extremely bad form. Society would judge you harshly for it. But the legal right never went away. It stayed on the books for over 1,000 years. Think about that. For a millennium, every Roman child grew up knowing that their father, technically, legally, had the right to end their life at any point. The most famous example comes from Emperor Augustus himself. When his daughter Julia was caught having multiple affairs, which in fairness was also a crime under Augustus's own morality laws that he had literally just passed, Augustus used his power as her father to banish her to a tiny island called Pandataria. She was forbidden from drinking wine, seeing visitors, or leaving. She lived out the rest of her days in what was essentially solitary confinement. And this was considered the merciful option because he could have just had her killed. Even Augustus's successor, Tiberius, kept Julia in exile, eventually moving her to an even more remote location where she reportedly starved to death. All perfectly legal under Patria Potestas. Dad said so. The law was finally softened under later emperors, but it wasn't fully abolished until the reign of Justinian in the 6th century AD. That means Roman fathers had legal kill rights over their families for roughly 1,000 years. Makes "because I said so" hit a little different. Number 3. Ancient Egypt. Killing a cat was punishable by death. Ancient Egyptians loved their cats. And I don't mean the way your aunt loves her cats. I mean they worshipped them. Literally. Cats were considered sacred animals associated with the goddess Bastet, the goddess of home, fertility, and protection. Bastet was typically depicted as a woman with the head of a cat, and her temples were filled with thousands of mummified cats that had been given full burial rites. Harming a cat in ancient Egypt was one of the worst things you could possibly do, and killing one, even by accident, was punishable by death. This wasn't just a law on paper either. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, who visited Egypt around 60 BC, wrote about witnessing a Roman soldier accidentally kill a cat. A mob formed almost instantly. Despite the fact that Egypt was desperate to maintain good relations with Rome, who at this point basically controlled their economy, the crowd dragged the Roman soldier into the street and beat him to death. The Egyptian government didn't intervene. They let it happen. Think about what that means. Egypt was effectively a client state of Rome. Killing a Roman citizen could have been an act of war, and the Egyptians were like, yeah, but he killed a cat, so... Relations between the two nations were apparently strained for a while after this, but Egypt never apologized. The cat thing was non-negotiable. When a household cat died of natural causes, the entire family would shave off their eyebrows as a sign of mourning. They'd remain in mourning until their eyebrows fully grew back. The dead cat would be mummified, sometimes wrapped in linen and decorated with painted faces, and buried in special cemeteries. Archaeologists have found cat cemeteries in Egypt containing hundreds of thousands of mummified cats. One site at Beni Hassan contained an estimated 300,000 cat mummies. The Egyptians were also terrified that their enemies would figure out this weakness. During one battle, the Persian king Cambyses II allegedly ordered his soldiers to carry cats on their shields as they charged the Egyptian lines. The Egyptians supposedly refused to fight back because they were afraid of accidentally hurting the cats. Whether that story is entirely true is debated, but the fact that it was even considered a plausible military strategy tells you everything you need to know about how serious the Egyptians were about their cats. Don't touch the cats. It's really that simple. Number 4. Ancient Sparta. If your baby was weak, it was thrown off a cliff. Sparta was not a normal place. Every aspect of Spartan society was built around one single purpose: creating the most effective fighting force the world had ever seen. And that process started at birth. When a Spartan baby was born, it wasn't taken home by its parents. It was taken to a council of elders called the Gerousia for inspection. The elders would examine the newborn for any signs of weakness, too small, too sickly, any kind of deformity. If the baby passed inspection, it was handed back to its parents to be raised as a Spartan citizen. If it didn't pass, it was carried to a place called the Apothete, a chasm at the base of Mount Taygetus, and thrown in. No exceptions, no appeals. Didn't matter if you were a farmer's kid or the king's own child. Every Spartan baby had to pass the same inspection. The philosopher Plutarch, who wrote extensively about Spartan customs, described it as a matter of simple logic from the Spartan perspective. A child that was not healthy enough to become a warrior was not healthy enough to live. Raising a weak child was seen as a waste of resources and a burden on a state that could not afford burdens. Now, some modern historians have pushed back on this, arguing that the accounts may have been exaggerated by non-Spartan writers who wanted to make Sparta seem barbaric. Archaeological surveys of the Apothete have found bones, but they were adult bones, possibly criminals or prisoners, not infants. So the cliff-tossing part might be embellished. But even the more conservative interpretations agree that Spartans practiced some form of infant selection. Weak babies were at minimum abandoned or left exposed to the elements, which amounts to the same thing with fewer dramatic cliffs. What's undeniable is that every Spartan boy who survived this initial inspection was placed into the agoge at age 7, a state-run training program that was basically a 13-year boot camp designed to turn children into professional killing machines. They were deliberately underfed to encourage them to steal food, and then beaten if they got caught. Not beaten for stealing, beaten for getting caught. The lesson wasn't don't steal. The lesson was don't get caught. Spartan parenting was a different vibe. Number 5. Ancient Athens. You could vote to banish anyone for 10 years. Athens is famous for inventing democracy. What most people don't know is that Athenian democracy came with one of the strangest and most ruthless political tools in history, ostracism. Once a year, the citizens of Athens held a special vote. No candidates, no proposals. Just one question. Is there anyone in this city who's gotten a little too powerful, a little too popular, or a little too annoying? If at least 6,000 citizens voted yes, a second vote was held. Every citizen would take a piece of broken pottery, called an ostraca, and scratch the name of the person they wanted gone. Whoever got the most votes was exiled from Athens for 10 years. No trial, no chance to defend yourself, no crime needed to have been committed. Just vibes. You could be the most upstanding citizen in Athens, never broken a single law, and if enough of your neighbors decided they didn't like you, or worse, that you were becoming too influential, you were gone. Pack your bags, see you in a decade. The original purpose of ostracism was actually pretty reasonable. Athens had just overthrown a series of tyrants, and they were terrified of anyone accumulating too much power again. Ostracism was supposed to be a safety valve, a way to peacefully remove a potential tyrant before they became an actual tyrant. And for a while, it worked exactly as intended. Several genuinely dangerous politicians were ostracized before they could seize power. But pretty quickly, it became a political weapon. Rival factions would organize mass voting campaigns against their opponents. Popular generals who had just won major battles would come home to find out they'd been voted into exile because their popularity threatened someone in the assembly. Aristides, who was widely considered one of the most honorable men in Athens, was ostracized in 482 BC, essentially for being too virtuous. People were literally sick of hearing about how great he was. And here's the best part. Archaeologists digging in the Athenian agora found a pile of ostraca, those pottery shards, with the same name written on them in the same handwriting, which means somebody was handing out pre-filled ballots. Ancient voter fraud. Democracy has apparently always been kind of messy. One famous story involves Aristides himself on the day of his ostracism vote. An illiterate citizen who didn't recognize him approached and asked Aristides to write a name on his pottery shard for him. "Whose name should I write?" Aristides asked. "Aristides," the man replied. "Why? Has he wronged you in some way?" The man shook his head. "No, I'm just sick of hearing everyone call him the Just." Aristides smiled, wrote his own name on the shard, and handed it back. That's either the most dignified or the most depressing moment in the history of democracy. Probably both. So there you have it. 5 ancient civilizations, 5 sets of laws that make our modern legal system look downright reasonable by comparison. Babylon punished you through your children. Rome let your dad kill you. Egypt would murder you over a cat. Sparta threw your baby off a cliff. And Athens could exile you because enough people thought you were annoying. And honestly, at least one of those would probably still get majority support if you put it to a vote today. I'll let you guess which one.